Ben & Jerry's Caramel Chocolate Cheesecake Truffles. An indulgent mixed bag of flavors and textures. My special guest this week is all about indulging his creative tendencies to make art. From leatherworking to painting to fiber arts, this man has his fingers in a lot of pies. Robert Herold is a true artist's artist. Constantly pursuing problem solving and researching new techniques for his work, Robert has created Protean Projects, an exciting exploration of art, skill, materials, and processes. Taking an intellectual approach to art in its many forms is one of the reasons I'm excited to sit down with my bowl of Ben & Jerry's Caramel Chocolate Cheesecake Truffles and have this chat. I'm Paul Pape, and this is Ice Cream with Streamers. Good morning again, Rob, and welcome, and thank you for joining us on this lovely episode of Ice Cream with Streamers.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
First and foremost, we always must clink the bowls. So if you want to grab your bowl of ice cream there, we'll cheers.
Oh, our bowls match.
They do.
Where am I going over here?
Yeah, you're going over there. Yep.
All
right, and clink. All right, there we go. So.
Can't go to the edge.
No, you can't. You got some 4:3 perspective going on there with your camera.
I have no idea why that is. It's welcome to capturing from a DSLR.
That is very true. So I have fought with that many times. So as I noted there, I am eating this mouthful of Ben & Jerry's, Ben & Jerry's truffle and it's just such a mixed bag of ice cream here, but it is delicious. So
hey, well, I mean, it's ice cream. How can you go wrong, right?
You cannot.
Just in general, right? You know, it's like I don't think I've ever had an ice cream where I was like, you know what, this was a poor choice. You know, it just never happened.
Once.
Once.
I had salt ice cream. They're like, no, you got to try this. It's delicious. It was supposed to be a salted caramel ice cream, and we had paid. It was my wife and I went out for our anniversary. We went to this really like she place, and we had this 6-course meal, and the last of it was supposed to be the salted caramel ice cream, and it comes out in this log, and it was salt ice cream, and it was the worst. Like, I think we each had a bite and we're like, yeah, we're not gonna do this one.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm good. Yeah, you know, I can't. Yeah, too much, because I've had like salted caramel ice cream, and
Sure.
that's like delicious.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could imagine if you overdo it on the salt, you're just like, no way, man.
It's like they added no sugar to that ice cream. It was pretty intense. But yeah. So let us. Now we've obviously we're here to eat ice cream, but we also want to get a little bit to know you. Salt and vinegar ice cream. That sounds horrible. But I would like to know a little bit about you, Rob. So you are stream-wise known as Protean Projects, but you yourself are not Protean Projects.
Yeah, no. Me, the person, is Robert Herold, and I am the artist and the creator of Protean Projects. And Protean Projects is kind of like the brand for the crazy stuff I do. It gives me the umbrella and kind of like separation from myself of the weird and crazy things I do. So that's Protean Projects, is like kind of my cumulative work throughout the years and kind of like the journey itself.
So my question would be, why separate yourself from it? I mean, is there something that is Rob that is going to be different than the work that you produce from Protean?
To be honest, a lot of it is, I try to take a lot of the personal out of it. Like, I'm kind of like an emotional being, creative being, but when it comes to designing products or designing pieces, I try to step outside of myself from it a little bit and kind of see it not just from my perspective, but from the perspective of others who are going to view it or experience it or deal with it. So it kind of, taking my personal biases out of it allows me to open up and kind of explore things I might not have explored just like on my own.
Okay, I can see that. Now, do you think at one point that you're going to eventually, like, because you are an artist, you are an artist who produces art. Do you think that you will at some point, like, you've done showings? I think you've mentioned before, you've done some shows before where it's your work. I mean, is there going to be a point where you go back to doing the emotional, artistic stuff, or is it just going to be?
Well, and I do. I mean, it's so when my stream itself started off as like leatherworking. I'd moved to California. My life had opened up opportunities and possibilities, and one of the ones I explored was streaming while creating. So that originally started off with explorations in leather, and which from that quickly led into leather finishing, which led into painting. So what I ended up doing was just ended up painting on leather. So it ended up becoming about the product and just becoming about the art. So for me, it is that journey. So there's no hard and fast of what direction I'm going to go. It's me following this, what I refer to as like the spark, that little something that carries me on. And sometimes it's hiding, sometimes it's not, but you find it, and then you just kind of like let it guide you through this little path. And so that's, I don't know, it's weird. It's like I've said before, it's like kind of like the ramblings of a madman. And sometimes you got to separate the madman from like the person itself and let it be its own entity.
I
that's
agree
what
with
Protean
that.
Projects is.
Yeah, okay. I always feel like my art is like this screaming, raging monkey that's trying to claw its way from my brain out through my left hand. That to me is always how art feels. And so, and there are days when the path is really easy, and there's days when the path is like really, really difficult. And the more it's difficult, the harder it is to get that screaming, raging monkey out of my hand. And so, I understand that, but I also think that there's really no way to disconnect completely the artist from
you can.
The project.
And I mean, it's kind of just easier for me to talk about Protean Projects than talk about Robert Herold, because it's self-promotion, at the end of the day, when you're talking about yourself, and that's something that, oddly enough, during an interview, it's kind of uncomfortable. Like when you're facing the person that is yourself and really being asked to answer those questions, it's a lot harder to do as yourself than as like a separate entity.
So you're more of I'd rather talk about the work and less about the person behind the work.
Yeah. No, I mean, my biases and my opinions don't tend to, I mean, they create the work, but I try not to let them drive it.
And I think that's honestly probably one of the most important lessons any kind of person who needs to sell something needs to learn, is that you can't have biases when you're selling a product, because it doesn't matter at the end who buys the product as long as the money is money.
Money frequently is money. It's weird.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter whom it comes from, whose bias it comes from. At the end of the day, I got to pay my bills with whatever money comes through. So as a person, I may have strong feelings towards something, but if those strong feelings walked in and handed me a few $100s, I'm going to take the few $100.
You're a little less strong at that point. You know what? That opinion, that's not as important. All right, let's go. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely understand that. And I mean, for me, like, even my outside, I've been an artist since like childhood. I then got my degree in fine art, specifically in sculpture. And then from there, did some gallery art, did some knife making, abstract work. Then I ended up being a glassblower for a few years. And then after being a glassblower, I ended up doing custom display and like fabrication for window displays in New York City. And then from there, I ended up doing lutherie, right? Like none of these like have any kind of like tangible connection, but they all play towards each other. They're all about gaining that experience, gaining that knowledge, and applying it to that next thing. The fact it's like a creative CrossFit,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really it, and just jumping around is really fun and exciting.
I think that, I took a different path. I never considered myself an artist until maybe 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Up until then, I just considered myself a designer because I went the theater route, where I started off as an actor, was told I was rubbish, and then got out of that, but didn't want to leave the theater world because I loved the creativity that was constantly pouring out. And so then I started just learning every aspect of it that I could. And my path is very parallel to yours, except that you went the art world and I went the theater world. But everything that you learned kind of like jumping from a, like one would say, like a career to another career and such, for me was always in theater, because with every show you have to learn a new skill set depending on what is being requested. And so I think we are very, very alike in that regard. And so it's kind of nice, find a kindred spirit out there.
I think, like, being someone who's around like the New York City theater scene, I did hang out with a lot of people from there. My best friend and roommate was a Vassar acting grad, and actually two of them were. And then I just was like, all right, they're fun. I'll hang out with them. So I ended up living with them for a while, and so I understand like the community, and it is very similar. We all speak the same language, especially anyone who's been in kind of like the more industrial creative side, like, doing window displays, working for the fashion industry, and then working in trade show, which is what I've been doing for the last 6 years. So trade show and event stuff, they're all the same. All the industries are the same. It's all the creativity feels the same and how it's being approached. So it's it's the same conversation. That's what's the cool thing about creatives talking to other creatives, is that it's like, okay, my background is completely different from yours, but we have the same language.
Now, do you feel
that's?
Oh, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off there. So,
no, go.
Do you feel that with this, since you're working more of the industry side of the creative, do you find that the drive is more to connect with the money side of things? Because obviously when you're doing a window display or if you're doing a trade show, the end goal is to have someone buy something, whereas with like a theater or an art, it's more for the appreciation of the product, not so much about the gathering of the monies for the product. Do you find that to be true as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, anytime you have a business associated with the creative side of it, it is about money. It's about the sales team. The sales team comes first, then the design team. And then fabrication, kind of thing. If you're in something that actually makes a product. But yeah, it's all the money. It's all clients. It's all in who you have to talk to. It's all in pleasing the clients. But at the end of the day, that's where it unifies. Whether you're an individual who's like making and working for people, or a company, at the end of the day, it's all about customer satisfaction, no matter what. And that's the joining factor. But whether it's customer satisfaction for the art of it or customer satisfaction of it for the money of it, it still leads to the same place. It comes down to whether the focus is on the intent, the emotion of the work, or on the practicality of the work.
Now, do you feel that having come from that background, kind of working in the industrial side of it, do you feel that affects or like influences heavily on your work? Like when you are creating, do you have that little niggling in the back of your head that says, is this sellable? Is this the thing that's going to bring the people and such? Or do you feel more of it's just like an artistic, I'm just going to do the art, and if it's appreciated, it's appreciated?
For me, well, I mean, I've always been very technically minded. Like there's always been a element of engineering, even in the most abstract of work that I do. And not only engineering, but like process. So for me, it's always about process. It's always about how I interact with that process, how I kind of feel emotionally about the process. Because if I will actually completely divert from a efficient route if I feel it's going to engage me in a better way, to create the product. Because at the end, you always have the end goal. How you get there is up to you. So for me, I will forego efficiency, which the industrial side of me is like, no, that's bad. But the artist side of me is like, you need to enjoy what you're doing. Sure. So that's been pretty self-gating. But yeah, I'm always thinking about how other people are seeing things. As a designer, I think you need to, no matter what, whether you're creating something you think is a piece of art or a product, you're always thinking in that mindset, that like creative problem solving mindset, which, that's my big thing. Creative problem solving is how you have to view the world and how you deal with the world, or how I deal with the world. And I suggest everyone else do it as well. But if you view the world through creative problem solving and seeing everything as an opportunity to learn and grow, life becomes a lot more exciting.
Absolutely.
Whether it's creative or otherwise.
Now, the creative problem solving, you mentioned that. That's actually one of your it's in your, I don't know, it's not your catchphrase or whatever on your website. It's a tag, you know.
Line, I guess.
But you are working on a project now that I think is different. It to me looked like a guitar, but you said no, wait.
Well, it's not technically a guitar because guitar has like certain scale lengths. So 2009, I started making seriously instruments. Like I've always poked around at different instruments throughout my college career. Like I've made kalimbes, I've made like lap steels, and then leading up into my like acoustic guitar design, where like I'm like, I don't know how to make guitars, but I'm already designing the guitar. I learned to make guitars because I designed one. Yeah, and so it's like weird. That's typically how a lot of projects happen for me, where it's like I have this spark. I want to see something. I get it down in paper. I put it into a CAD program, and I need to bring it to life. So now it's on me to figure out how the hell I'm going to do that. But not only that, but do it in a way that is accurate to what needs to be done. So that's where I've relied on a lot of my experience in sculpture, materials to kind of bring me through. So because I have the previous guitar experience, I want to do something different now. So I'm doing a 3D printed modular instrument. So I'm calling it like the Muse right now or something like that, MUZ. And it's just going to be that. It's you get off-the-shelf parts that you can assemble with these 3D printed pieces, and you get to choose your scale length. So whether it's diatonically fretted or chromatically fretted, you get to choose how many strings you're going to want to do. And I want this almost parametric instrument that you can play with and give the power to the makers to make unique and interesting instruments. So that's kind of what I'm working on now, but now I just need to figure out how the hell I'm going to do it. So, that's what my last few streams have been about.
Now, are you interested, because you said that you don't know how to build a guitar, but you're now designing guitars. Do you find yourself approaching projects like that? Like, are you a research the thing on like the proper process or anything like that? Or do you just like have the object and you're like, I think creative problem solving, I understand the mechanics here, and I'm gonna build this thing the way I think it should be, and you explore the process more that way, or are you let's go look at some research and try and figure out how they did it originally and kind of explore and cultivate it from that and see if you can expand on it?
I think it's a bit of both for me. I'm very heavily research focused. That's always been where my most enjoyment out of a process is that beginning creative part where you are like figuring out how something is going to be made. So you look up books. So I have my reference library in front of me of just like materials, books, process. Like I've gotten rid of all like anything that's not a reference book for me is like gone. So it's like when I go to read, I'm like, this is kind of boring, but at least I have the resources. But then, so I'll do my own research locally. I'll cultivate the idea. I won't be limited by conventionality at first. Once I have like kind of my ideas and what I think is going to work, then I delve deeper. I look into the math of it. I look into the engineering of it. I look into the history of it and pull what fascinates me from there and drive down that path. So it's like, okay, I'll look up truss rods and I'll be like, okay, well that seems interesting, but doesn't really apply to me. So maybe I'll look at this instrument that came from the Middle East and see what they kind of did that made it work. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I'll add that in. So it ends up becoming this piecemeal process. And then it comes down to me and my own like creativity of like, how do I merge all of this beautifully? Because at the end of the day, like right now, I'm not designing for anything other than functionality. Right now, I'm just making sure everything is going to function perfectly as an instrument. Then I go into the sound of it and the beauty of it. And so it becomes this iterative refining process.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, it's it's everything. It's like you just take all of your experiences, all of your knowledge, you take whatever comes from you. I mean, the fact that we as a society now can go to YouTube, go to Reddit, and basically know everything, if you're good at filtering, which is at the end of the day, that's what the internet is. If you're good at filtering, you're good at the internet. That's what it comes down to.
It's much like a library. Anytime you go to a library, it's the exact same thing. It's filtering, but it's filtering through physical items.
My mother's a librarian, so like that, kind of, mentality is there, I think, for a reason.
Sure.
But for the most part, it's so my dad's a doctor, my mom's a librarian, and so I get kind of this meticulous head space, and then meticulous hand space, and that's, kind of what led to kind of the creative me, because I wasn't going to be either of those. And art was always my thing, like
were you
making things.
Were you pushed into one of those categories? I mean, were your parents like, you should become a doctor?
No, I'm very, 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 like, not good at dealing with authority. So like anyone who tells me to do anything, I'm like, no, just go away, and like I'll do my own thing, except I'm never that nice about it. I'm really rude and like mean about it. I don't like people telling me what to do, which is why I stream now. But because I get to do what I want to do, that's the fun part.
My wife and I had the exact same conversation.
I was never pushed into anything because it's an immovable object. So, it's the only thing that's pushing me is my brain. I don't even feel like I have control over it. It's just like, again, that spark. It's like following that will-o-wisp in the dark, wherever it leads me.
Now, I think that's interesting because I know you are married. You have a family now, but your wife, you said, is a professor. And she does computer science, if I remember correctly.
She's a researcher. I don't want to get like too deep into
sure.
what she does, but she's an amazingly intelligent person, and she's like, it's a scientist and an artist. Something you wouldn't think necessarily always adds up, but it comes down to that mentality. It's how you approach the problem that kind of unifies us and allows that conversation to happen. So we have amazingly interesting conversations about things that neither of us really know much of anything about. Like, she'll talk to me about the research she's doing and some of the advancements she's making, and it's like astonishing. But I listen to her and I'm like, oh my God, I love the way you're thinking about the problem. And I'm like, oh, I could take that mentality and apply it to this problem I'm having over here. And so we're very cross-interested in kind of like how we approach the problems, not necessarily the content of it, because honestly, at the end of the day, I'm not interested in the content as much. I'm not interested in the final product as much as the road that got me there and process, what I've learned from it.
Well, that's actually what I wanted to touch on. It was not so much whom you're married to and what she's doing, but the fact that you have there's a dichotomy between the two of you as far as like career path and that. And I share the same thing with my wife. And is there a sense of competition between the two of you, or is it more just
No, it's a team. We are team Sassy Alpaca. Like we because here's the thing, like last November I moved from like living in New York my entire life to moving to California. So we picked everything up, moved cross country, got married, and then had a kid. So like we ripped the Band-Aid off on like adulthood real hard, and it's been awesome, and I wouldn't do it any other way. Also, I mean, like we also got to cross country, so we drove from New York to California and got to see the country, and go through and see how windy Nebraska is, and hung out in Colorado, and it's
that's the way to do it.
It was really fun. It was fun to like see the country and kind of really have this transition point in my life, which led to, again, we moved here, then ended up getting married, and we'd been together for a long time, and we were just like, all right, let's do this, and then have our kid. And I just had a kid, ripped Band-Aid off.
Yeah, there you go.
Now he's I think he's crying in the other room. I think it's all is well though.
We cannot hear it, so it is all right.
That's good.
No, but that's I mean, and so you are new to fatherhood as well, which is
I am. Yeah,
so
it's
something
brand
that
new.
is-
But I'm excited. It's something I've wanted for a long time. And like as like an older guy who's like, I'm like surprised at how well I'm handling it. I'm like super cool about it. You know, it's like it's something like if I was like 25, I'd probably be freaking out right now. But I'm like, maybe I'm just too jaded. I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to enjoy the good parts of this, and like the less ideal parts are just like whatever. That's just another another day.
And I think that you're going to find as your child grows that everything that you think you know about processes, about the artistic journey, and about all of the creative problem solving, your kid will throw all of that out the window. And you will be, if you open your eyes to it, you will be amazed at the problem solving skills of small children and like how they approach things, because they do approach it from an absolute lack of knowledge. And so as they try to do anything, I've got 3 boys, and I watch them all approach everything from a completely like bizarre standpoint. But I think if I could capture that in a bottle and sell it, that would be
Right?
the way to do
Like
it.
that youthful like naivete of like how you see life. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
you don't know anything, but you see it in this way that I would love to see it in, but I can't because I didn't blink. And
Right.
It's I don't know. It's but that's the thing. That's whenever I'm thinking about everything, I always just try to approach a problem from someone else's perspective. How would someone who's in a completely different situation see this product or this idea or like this work? Which is, that's where like when I start getting super like personal with my artwork in terms of like really putting myself into it, I'm like, I can't see it from how other people are going to see it because it's like so deeply personal that it's hard to break out of that. And so that's why after I recently did this like fairly large project painting, I had to step away, and that's why I'm doing more mechanical stuff. And this typically is like kind of my flow. You have to jump from something super concentrated in terms of technical skill to something that's like just super free, and I find just jumping around like that keeps you even keeled as a creative mind.
Sure.
You don't get too wrapped up in a single process or a single way of doing something.
No, not at all. And then I think that it also helps to keep you loose and open, so you can see the forest through the trees, so they'd say, as far as projects go. So is there one project in particular that you're really proud of that you've made or anything like that?
In terms of during my streaming career or like just in general in life?
I would say as an artist, just is there that one thing that you're like, yeah, this is that thing that I'm like really like super dope proud about?
My
Yeah,
acoustic
just super
guitar
dope.
that I designed and built is probably like that was the point where I was like, you know what? If I had that $2 million, I'd get a space, set up a shop that would be just for making instruments and experimenting with instruments, and that's what I could see myself doing. Now, I tell myself this every time I start a project. I'm like, this is the one. You know what? I'm going to be a leather worker tomorrow. I'm going to be a luthier next day. I'm going to be a glass blower. It's like, what are you doing? I can't stop myself. And, it's, as much as I say I'd love to tie down into one craft, I just don't think it's ever going to happen. I'm just too much of a wild child creatively.
You get
one thing.
You get one shot on this rock, man. Make the most of it. You know what I'm saying? Just
I just want to learn as much as I can.
Yeah.
To be honest,
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that's it. I just want to learn and then kind of share as much as I can.
So you said earlier that you are not a fan of the authority.
Yeah.
Is there a career like the 180-degree career that you would never see yourself doing, but have maybe an interest in knowing how that career works? Because I know as a creative, because you said you've been a creative for as long as you can remember. Is there ever that time that you're like, you know what, I'd love to crunch number, or how does that crunch? That seems interesting.
I'd love to be an accountant. No, I don't at all. But you know what I really want? I want to have that skill. Like, I don't want to do that. I want to have that skill. I want to know law. So I am interested in law. I'm interested in accounting. I'm interested in politics. But I don't have the temperament to do any of those. And no one in those fields wants to work with me. I'm just letting them know ahead of time. It's just because I like to say things, and I like to say what, I think about things, and I'm very unvarnished when it comes to that. So, I mean, as much as I appreciate those fields and would love to be able to do what they do and have that knowledge set, it's just not something I could ever see myself doing. It was hard enough being in a design department in an office. You know what I like? It's like I was still doing creative work, but I'm like, God, people just suck. And that's not a head space you want to be in. So that's why I switched to streaming. I wanted to feel like people are awesome again.
Now, do you feel that as a streamer that you're still able to just voice whatever you want, or do you feel that you're capping yourself here and there to not alienate?
Honestly, for my stream at least, I kind of just go with the flow. I don't really put on like a persona. It's just free flowing. Because for me, streaming is about transparency to my process.
Okay.
More than anything else, it's a driving factor of how I express myself, and the fact that these are thoughts, what I'm doing and the thoughts I'm having haven't been vocalized until now. And I think there's value in these thoughts. So even whether it's for me or someone else is inconsequential to the fact that it's out there. I'm doing my part to make sure that my voice is being heard on topics that I'm passionate about. And that's it. That's the only kind of capping factor. It's like, if I'm passionate about it, I'll speak about it. And if I'm speaking passionately about it, it's probably because I have something to say, Otherwise, I'll just be like, I don't quite know. And I'll just absorb information as opposed to putting my opinion on it.
Now, do you think that the longevity, because I know with streaming, we're limited in how long a piece is put up. I mean, we've got our VODs and they last between 14 days and 60 days or whatever it is up there. We do have the option of uploading to the cloud, to the YouTube, to the wherever. Do you feel that longevity in your process is something that you'd like to put out there? Like the how you got there, putting it out there as far as like in a permanent stance, almost like a cloud library of your processes so that others can glean that information? Do you think that's something that's important, or do you just want to put out what's there and leave it into temporary?
I'm okay with either. I think having the backup is good. I think over time it needs to be curated. The problem with Twitch streams is, what do you do with them? I mean, you have 8 hours of content that, to be honest, I mean, there's a lot to glean from it, but let's be honest, during a typical day, I'm going to make like 3 solid points, that make 3 solid rants. Everything else is kind of like, but there's those points in the street that's just like, oh yeah, I said something cool, and those are what you want to save. But for me personally, usually I don't save a lot of my conversation. It's important that I have the conversation, but saving it is less important. But what I did start doing is running dictation software while I stream, so that my words are being written down. Oh. So that I can then go through and be like, ooh, that was a cool thing, and then maybe. And so I have kind of logs of what's being said. I don't know what I'm going to do with them just yet. I was thinking like, I'm going to translate that into like blog posts and kind of again, refine those thoughts that I have. But as far as the video, I actually just take it, chop it up, and time lapse it because there's nothing cooler than seeing a project come from scratch or design to completion in however many minutes it takes.
Sure. Yeah, as I just spent the last weekend editing hours and hours and hours of video, trying to distill it down to its key moments. Yes, the idea of trying to find those nuggets of wisdom in the piles of poo is a difficult task there. So the time lapsing, I think, is very interesting.
Time lapse is good. Also, but the the marker, like in Twitch, like it allows you to like hit markers. I've actually kind of used that every now and then, be like, oh, that was cool, mark that. So then I know, just like, okay, hit to that point in the video, and or like this point into the video is like, okay, that was some good stuff, so I can like kind of, you know, get through a lot of the chaff, you know.
I have this lovely Stream Deck thing in front of me, and I need to have a button that just says "the more you know" and just does the little flash across it, so that I can just stream through it and then find that moment and be like, no, this is the 30 seconds you need to know. Let's go from there. But,
well, to be honest, like there's a lot that can be done, I would say. I think there are a lot of tools that streamers could have if the programs were developed a little bit more. Me and my wife were developing kind of a little program to do my time lapses. Now, right now, it's just like kind of it's like a Python scripting that just goes through and sorts the images, so I don't actually have to do any editing. And so you just have things that go onto the screen that mark something, so the program knows to like, okay, at this point, take, you know, this. So if you had something that, you know, popped up, just even it could be one pixel in a corner. And as long as it's a color, then it's going to recognize that and be like, oh, okay, take that. Now I'll just take the 2 minutes before, the 2 minutes after. Here's that clip. Take that. So, and then it could just compile all of those individual clips and then compile it down to a single video and then output something on YouTube. So there are a lot of little tricks that a lot of people can do.
I think it's actually a really brilliant idea there that needs to be like seriously pursued, because I think as a streamer, I know that, you know, as a streamer we are requested to do 4 to 6 to 8 hours of streaming, but that stream of consciousness, I mean, that is literally me talking to fill the air, whereas and that is to help us build an audience, to help us to achieve this state of being a streamer, but then it's gone in the ether in the 14 days or whatever you have for your VODs. And so then the next logical step is to archive and put it out there into a cloud or something like that. But no one wants to watch 6 to 8 hours of stream of consciousness unless you're my child.
I realize that.
Yeah. And so this thing that, and we've talked about it briefly before, this program that you have that does that type of thing, that allows you to archive in real time, like, you know, putting a marker in or something like that, so that you can then distill those moments out, is actually a brilliant idea that I think that I think is a sellable idea for streamers.
Well, see, here's the problem. I come up with like 12 of those a day.
Sure.
The problem is I don't have the resources. And you know, we had talked earlier about kind of like what could be done to like benefit creative and stuff like that, and it's like, yeah, a lot of cool ideas, but it's like, yeah, where are the resources, you know? And that's, as streamers, we're limited by what we can do as individuals, and we either need computers to help us or we need other people to help us, and other people's are like expensive and annoying. So, you know, programs are really, I think, where you know, it's going to be beneficial for streamers to kind of set up a system that can kind of auto curate their VODs and their videos, because I mean, for a lot of bigger streamers, they get clips, they just get tons of clips, but we need to kind of clip ourselves to have that content be something that we can distribute, which is also something that is unique to kind of creative. It's like, we really need to have like this secondary and tertiary like content off of the stuff, otherwise it's almost not worth it to do, you know? It's like, we're taking all this video, we have all these frames, what do we do with it? We have to do something, you have to say something with it, or else we're not doing our part as like creatives. So it's that pressure, I think.
It is, and you had touched on something about the need for creatives to actually come together and create something that will allow us as creatives to have a longevity, to have more of a voice, and that type of thing. And while machine learning is getting there, the AI, I mean, it's almost as if we need a production team that's sitting in a control booth that's like, oh, this is the part that we need to keep, and this is the part we need to keep. But obviously we can't afford that. And then it comes down to, well, we need the programs to do it, but we can't afford to hello there. We can't afford to pay the people to create these things. So then do we crowdsource it? And then is it too many cooks in the kitchen trying to create this? And as we all know, you know, one of us is always smarter than all of us. And so where do we go
stay
from
lean in decision making is something I try to subscribe to. I've been in a lot of design meetings where there are just too many people in there and nothing is accomplished because of it. And that's, I think, just a problem in the creative world in general. It's like you have a lot of very passionate people who are very passionate. It's like you hit a lot of roadblocks, and you need to have a curated team to really make effective choices. But it's in that creation of the team and the resources and skills that is going to determine the success and the failure of a project. And that's the thing. Like all of these ideas I have, I'm like, yeah, it's doable, but I need a software engineer. I need a UI specialist. I need someone who's going to deal with kind of like the netcode aspect of it. It's like I would have to have this entire team to back up this idea. I just don't got that kind of time. It's like I just want to make stuff and like play with my baby.
You're the Tony Stark without the millions, is what you are.
Right? That's what it is.
So you're tin foil man. You're not quite Iron Man. Is the problem?
No, yeah. I'm like, if Elon Musk never left the garage, you know what I mean? It's
right.
Like, that's how it kind of feels, and it sucks. But that's the benefit of Twitch. That's the benefit of streaming in general, and like online content creation. That, look, I don't have resources beyond what I have around me, but I'm still saying the same things that these important people with resources are saying. Whatever happens to it is kind of like off to the world, but at least I'm doing my part and saying what's important to me and what I think is correct.
Now, do you feel that putting original ideas, what would some people look at, your $1 million ideas, putting it out there, do you think that saying it into the ether via streaming or such is something that eventually you'll see the product and you'll be like, that was my idea and now I feel cheated? Or do you feel like...
I mean, I get that every now and then, even just recently. So I kind of came up with this idea. I don't even know if I was the first to even do it. I probably wasn't, but it was unique to me and the research I've done. But I made, I needed to do something with my leather bags. So I wanted to do something artistic with the flap. I always liked patina work, always liked different kind of aspects of age and aesthetics. So I ended up doing kind of like these bubble patterns where I would take pigment with soap and then bubble it onto the leather, creating these very interesting shapes, this very organically created texture. And we kind of got it down, kind of perfected it out, and I made some posts about it on Imager, and provided backup content to it. And then on YouTube the other day, something got suggested for me, which is the exact same technique. And I'm like, do they know? I don't know. I don't. But honestly, you know what? It wasn't, my first instinct wasn't to be like, oh, they stole my idea. My first instinct was, you know what? If you were to use a larger diameter straw, you would actually get larger bubbles than, you could do there. So it becomes that there is this openness and there's this sharing of ideas. But this person, we both came up with probably the same idea, roughly around the same time, for like the same purpose. So my instinct is to help that person get better at it. Because in my opinion, if someone else can do something I came up with better than me, you can have it. You did it. Sure, I got you like to that point, but you made it better. And that's the most important thing. Not my pride. It's the product, the end part. Like the fact that society is marginally better because you took my idea and made it just that much more. And so like on that video, I'm like, hey, you know what you should do? Play with straw diameters. That's going to give you a lot of variation. So I'm not going to be angry about other people doing similar things to me. I'm going to try to help them out. So hopefully that there ends up this, cultivate the culture you want.
I think it's going to be, I think that's the difference between a creative approach to problem solving as opposed to a financial approach to problem solving. If the world was more like the guy who created penicillin was like, everybody just have penicillin. It's going to help everybody. I'm not here to make billions of dollars. But then you get the guy who's like, I'm going to buy insulin. And he's like, I'm going to take insulin from people and make my money on it. And I think as a creative, we're like, well, let's put it out there and maybe someone can do something with this, because you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, you don't have or we can all come together to create this better, to better ourselves as a creative world, to create better stuff. I think that I think that is a noble approach to it. But at the end of the day, we still have to pay bills. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, so my biggest fear is not that other people are going to take my idea, is that other people are going to take my idea and lock me out of it. That's what scares me, is this concept of like, hey, someone corporate's like, looking, that's a good idea, I'm going to take that, I'm going to patent that, I'm going to trademark that, you can't do that anymore, even though there's going to be physical acknowledgement of the creation of that idea, and that's going to be cataloged. So it's like, I talk about ideas on stream as they're coming to me. The creation of that idea is documented now. Does that matter? Does reality actually ever matter anymore in the kind of like corporate system that we were in? And this is like me getting a little like tinfoil hat going against the man.
You are tinfoil man, so it is okay,
Yeah.
But I think I agree. We're going to venture here into the law of ideas here, which I think we had talked a little bit briefly about it before, and I think it's a noble thing to talk about, because as people who are putting it out there, are we in a place in technology? I mean, because everything that we say, regardless if the VOD is there for 14 days, 400 days, or eternity, it's there for eternity, because once it hits the net, it's forever. There's a back of it somewhere. Twitch
has all of these videos somewhere.
Right.
That's guaranteed. Whether you have access to it or not, they are in a server somewhere, and it's a forever thing now. So have fun with that society.
Right. So if you come up with an idea and you put it out there, even if it's off the cuff, and then you find out that, I mean, I don't know how you would trail it to the person unless you're like, Greek Mustachio came out with this this great thing and started making billions of dollars on it, where he heard it on my stream and said, hey, that's a great idea, as a comment on my stream. I mean, I don't know how you would ever prove it, but is that something that can be held up in court? I don't know.
And I honestly would, every lawyer, period, would say, why are you streaming that in general?
Right.
Take your ideas, have it go through the process. But here's the thing, we are in a shift as a society from an analog to digital life, and digital is becoming just as important, if not more, every day. So we as a society are going to have to start legally changing how we define things, because reality does play in. We are at a point where idea creation is being documented in a way that it could never be before. If you could imagine 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, if someone was like, I have a video of me creating this person who took the idea and then ran with it, in that chat, it's documented. How can a court look at that and be like, oh yeah, no, that guy who patented it after the fact came up with the idea? There's documentation that they didn't. So, but does that hold up in our current system? It doesn't.
No, absolutely not.
It comes down to a system having to change. But also at the same time, for me, I can't stop what I'm doing.
You're going to put the ideas out there.
Conversation is important.
Yeah, and because we as creatives, and we're streamers, we are filling air with a stream of consciousness. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the best ideas come out of talking it out. Whether you're talking it to a group, you're talking to a significant other, or you're talking to the camera itself. When you are working on something and you need a better mousetrap, you're just going to work it out. And as a streamer, are you protecting your idea? No, you're not at the moment. I mean, we've got people saying that yes, in the comments here, that it is proof, but the proof for right now that is the built-in and who's the first person to get it patented, first one to take
Yeah,
that
well,
idea.
and that's the thing. It's like who
actually
goes through the process, who goes through
Right.
the system, and that's again like for me, yeah, sure, it's gonna suck. Like I'm sure I've screwed myself out of many monies, and you know, it's again, it's kind of fine. You know, I've worked in industry, so
Mhm.
working in industry is nothing but people stealing your ideas and you never getting any credit.
They're stealing your
So
credit.
how is it
and
any
that's the
different
worst.
whether I'm like doing it? You know, it's like, granted, I was getting a salary at that point, but you know, it's,
I've actually pitched an idea before, was told no, and then found it on television and print ads 3 months later. And I tried to sue, and I was told, I went to I did the whole thing, and I was told,
Not
you
worth
didn't do the right things, man. Sorry. And
Well,
it was
I mean-
like, oh,
very prevalent in like this is like super shady practice, but in the exhibit design industry, you're always doing spec work. You're constantly throwing out your designs, your renderings, your ideas. So like you have a proposal, they're like, hey, we want this size booth, we want this kind of interaction, or this kind of event, you know, and so show us all your ideas, and then we'll choose. And then what happens inevitably is you get a shady client who works with a shady you know, exhibit house, and they're like, hey, we got this idea from them over there, but it was way expensive. So can you take this and build it for less? Happens all the time, constantly. You'll go to that show, because usually you end up working with someone else at that show. You go and you're like, hey, I remember that guy, I designed it, you know. And there's nothing poopier than that. But then again, you just don't work with those people again. So it's a mistake
Right.
that good businesses only make once, and the problem is there are bad clients, and you just got to deal with that.
yeah. And you never know what trap you're stepping into, you know, and you've got to take it. If you approached everything as though the world is going to get you, you're never going to be fulfilled in whatever it is that you do. You've got to have that stupid trust that humans will be decent.
And that's how I like, again, I left the office culture because I'm like, I needed to like people again. You know, I wanted to interact intelligently and without this kind of veil of money between. So the best part about me and like my chat is that it's open. Like I want to hear what you have to think. I'll say what I think in response, and it becomes a conversation that you're almost not allowed to have within a corporate sphere, because it is all about these efficiencies. Like even having a conversation about making the product is like, okay, well we're on the clock. You know, it's like we can't talk about the thing we're gonna make, just make it. You know, it's like, well, don't we? Okay, fine. You know, well, I'll make this thing that is gonna take a week in an hour, because that's what the client wants. You know, and
But then you find you're building the worst mousetrap, not the best mousetrap.
well, and that's the thing. I mean, there's a constant battle between project management and client services and design, and that's just industry. It's always that's the hierarchy of it. But that's why I left, and that's why I'm streaming to, you know, a bunch of people. So my ramblings and my madman talks are like public knowledge now, you know, as opposed to just me yelling at my other office mates.
So tangenting off that, if you now spend the week doing the hour-long project, but you're creating a product that you are selling, what do you charge for? Do you charge for the creativity time, or do you just charge for the hour it takes to make it?
It really depends. Like if it's a custom piece that's coming my way, I did the estimates in my company for 5 years. I know how to estimate what it's going to take. I can tell you exactly how long something's going to take, how much, or like what's reasonable too. And that's the thing. Like even like, so I will estimate everything I do on stream. Not that it's, you know, going to be for anyone, but it's for my own record keeping. It's
Sure.
if I ever want to make that again, I have a laundry list of all the things I need to get, what it exactly took to make that, how many hours. If I did it in multiples, did like 3 leather bags at one time as opposed to the one, I'm going to compensate for that. And it's just knowing about your process. And so for me, like I know exactly what to charge for the work put in. Whether someone's going to pay for it is a completely different, you know, bag of worms. But at least I know that the prices that I'm putting out are not going to hurt me. And
Now,
at the end of the day, any creative, that's kind of the goal.
sure. Now, as somebody who's constantly learning and wanting to know new skills, do you find yourself, like, I'll take on a job that somebody's like, hey, can you make this? And my entire job is built around custom pieces. So they're like, hey, can you do this? And I've never done it before. And I always say yes because I love a challenge and I love to learn new things. And I feel that you're in the exact same boat. But I charge an education fee, which means my fee is less if I've never done it before, because I know it's going to take me longer. And while I'm trying to figure out like an hourly and stuff, I mean, because I know in some things, you know, I'm charging a decent hourly rate because I am what would be considered a master in that field. But then if you're doing something I've never done before, I have a pretty good idea of how to approach it, but I'm not going to charge you the full rate because I'm going to struggle, and I don't want to charge you for me learning something. Do you feel?
Well, that's where the reasonable thing comes in. One thing I would say to any creative is never just look at the hours. Have it be an aspect of hours modified by skill level.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime someone comes at me with a new like something that I'm like, I'm actually not sure, like, and I will be fully open and honest and be like, so this is my experience that allows me to approach this problem, but to be honest, we're going to be working together to solve this. So I'm just very open and honest about that from the get-go, because some people get scared, like, oh, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, then I'm going to hold off, and then I'll be like, that's probably a good idea. You know, because if you are like worried, it's always better to work with someone you feel confident in. So that's why I'm always like super transparent, like, hey, this is what it's going to take. And we work together with the client to get to the achieved outcome. But yeah, if I'm unskilled at what I'm doing, I'm going to cut it down a little bit, but not much, because I still need to learn.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, it's, you know, your gain and experience, it's part of the job, and
it should be, yes.
Yeah, well, it should. I mean, no, you're naturally going to learn no matter what you do. If you're doing it, you're learning. Even if it's just down to the muscle memory. I found for me, like doing leather bags, the muscle memory of stitching, doing my saddle stitch, that the first one I did, bag took twice as long, just because my muscle memory wasn't developed. So that's something that you even have to take into account. For me, like, muscle memory is a huge portion, and there's actually a very specific curve I follow whenever I'm doing something. I'll shoot straight up in terms of knowledge, and then I plateau, and then like kind of like dive off in terms of how much time something's going to take me. Because what happens is, like, I rush it, do kind of a rough job, and then I'm like, okay, adjust, go a little bit slower, get the muscle, and then the muscle memory starts developing, and that just becomes faster. So, you know, I'll learn within the span of one project, but it might take 2 or 3 before I actually get to the point where I'm feeling like, all right, I'm at the efficiency point that I'm going to achieve. And it's just all about knowing your own process and knowing the level of your own quality.
Now, do you feel that sometimes you end a project though it's not done? Like in theater, we always know, you know, you have opening night, and so
deadlines.
No matter
you have deadlines,
and sometimes you're like, well, I know this could be better, but either the client isn't going to pay for it to be better, or I don't have the time to do it better, but I'm hoping that eventually I will do it in the future. Do you find yourself as an artist because you're pretty much on your own schedule here, as far as the pieces that you're going, do you find yourself just saying, I gotta finish even though it's not done?
Depends. It depends on the project. Like, there are some projects I'll be like, I'm doing a disservice if I finish this now.
Oh, okay.
My head is not in the point where finishing this is going to lead to the ideal outcome for that product or that project. So you have to just, but again, it's all about knowing yourself, knowing your own process and what's important to you, because being able to say enough's enough on that is very important, because at the end of the day, it is that end part that, you know, what is coming out. And if it's subpar, then all that work you did ahead of time is, you know, for naught. But very rarely do I have to switch gears mid-project. Like, when I start a project, I'll know there's a deadline or not. And if there is a deadline, then you just adjust to approach that. It's all about knowing that end goal and that end time, and then just adjusting your process to still have as much enjoyment out of that process even though it's like cut short. But sometimes working within a deadline is ideal because that's where you kind of iterate in a more efficient manner. So
Now,
it's everything
is there ever been a project that was either too much, like you couldn't do it, or that one, the great white whale? I mean, have you had one of those projects yet?
Okay, so I have, actually it's in a box right down here. It's because I've had to pull out all of my old, like, so all of my tools and stuff are like in various boxes and bins around me, and they're organized almost by style of project. So I have a bin that's all Lutherie supplies, and in that Lutherie supply thing was a tube amp that I started making from scratch, like hand soldered and everything. Like, this is the board for it.
Okay.
So like we're talking like all hand soldered, but I got scared midway through this. The amount of like amperage and like electricity flowing through this thing scares the crap out of me. And I'm a very relatively safe worker. When I was in college, I ran both the metal and wood shop for our school as far as like a monitor. So like I've seen some stuff go down, and I've actually been victim to it. But it's safety is huge, and like electronics is not something I'm comfortable enough with to be like, yeah, I can fake this. Like you can fake wood carving, you can fake leather working, but you know what, electricity is going to do what it's going to do. And I can't wish that to be just work out. No, it's going to electrify me. I'm going to die if I'm like making like too bad a mistake. That scared me, so I put that away, but I haven't gotten rid of it, mainly because like I totally got way ahead of myself. Like I painted the whole chassis, I even painted the cups on the transformers, so it looks really cool. Nothing's connected. So it's like, it's one of those things, like one day I'm going to figure out what the heck's going on with that and like finish it. But who knows? We'll see what happens.
That's when you bring in a friend.
So there's some.
And then you have them do it. That's when you bring in the expert. You're like...
And that's probably what would probably end up happening eventually. Because again, it's like a fear. It's like, I don't need to be anxious working on a project. If I ever, like, anxiety is something that follows me around. So I don't need to invite it in.
Sure.
So... we'll see what happens with that. It's really cool to look at, and I love the thought of it, and like how each resistor, each capacitor like can shape the sound. So it's fascinating, scary as hell.
Now, is there something that's ever come across your brain, like it's skittered across, that you're like, someday I'm gonna do that, but you're like, but not now because I'm not quite there, but there's that. I'm gonna build my tin foil man suit eventually.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, like I'll have like 5 of those a day that are just like huge ideas. I mean, when you study art and art history, you have this context for scale that is just beyond compare. Like you get these cathedrals and how they were built, and you get these like art installations that are just gigantic, or even you get like paintings that are 16 foot by 16 foot. So you see these people working at ridiculous scales, and then I got this like 6 by 6 painting I'm working on, and I'm like, oh man, like this isn't epic. But it's in my brain, like
sure.
When I'm making stuff, even when I'm designing, I'm thinking these things are huge, but then I'm working on a 36 by 48 inch table. That's my manifold for my entire area. So like make it work within that, so it's in my brain, it's all huge, it's scaled and gigantic, but in reality it's
You should step into
or something. I don't
right.
know.
You should step into VR and sculpt sometime, because I can take take those and make them huge and feel like you're doing God's work.
Yeah. Well, and that's I do think kind of that's where online content is going to eventually end up. It's just inevitable. It's going to be a matter of time that we connect into this process in a way that, again, allows those with less resources to do more. And I think giving that power to those creative minds is going to completely shape the way society interacts with creative thinking. just because it's going to be accessible in a way that it never was before. You know, it's going to be real, which is going to be scary for a long time, you know, until people get comfortable with it.
And that's an interesting point, because I would love that utopia that you talk about there, but I think that there would have to be such a seismic change in how we approach things for that to happen. I mean,
no, I think it's gonna be a stepping process. It's going to be small changes that lead into that kind of interactivity. I mean, so here's my big idea last night. So this is why I haven't slept in a while, other than the baby. So day before was totally baby. Last night was totally my brain, and I hate it for it. But like my idea was like, okay, imagine like Twitch. How you browse Twitch is abysmal. Everyone knows that. Discoverability is horrible. We can get into like some of my rants on Twitch later, but mainly it's because it comes from a point of like there's so much that can be done, and there's like a frustration that's like you're not doing any of it. That could be really cool. But my idea last night was like, okay, what if you turned like, call it Twitch discovery, go to a tab, and then you have like a map. You have like Artist Alley, you have, you know, hardcore gamer utopia, you have, you know, the chill, you know, chat lounge, you know, and you go, and it's like a map, and you go to each one of these lands. You go into that land and you see like, okay, we're going to go to Artist Alley, you know, go into that. Then that goes into another map, and then you kind of see these streamers, and like imagine it as like a market square, you know, where you can use a controller or a WASD and travel through these booths that are curated by the content creators, and things that you can have this almost natural interaction where if something grabs your attention, you can follow it. So, and it doesn't matter whether they have 200 viewers or 2 viewers. You're allowed to gravitate to what interests you. And doing it within this kind of almost game-like 3D atmospheres also lets you become a character and within this world. And imagine a Twitch where you just browse by walking down the street. You know, everyone has their own curated storefronts, everyone has like their own things. How cool would that be? And then that just leads into, you know, furthering that down. So it's like, okay, you enter into that store, and then what happens? Okay, well, you have the, you know, the back wall is like the person's stream. The side panel is like, oh, these are their sponsorships. Here's like some information on them. You got the other side wall that, oh, these are other streamers that he works with and stuff like that. And then you have like this kind of 3D, you know, place where you have like a table. And if you're at the table, you can talk better directly to the streamer because you know that those are the people who are interested in like the direct process. But then you can have those other people who are like at a table in the back that are just hanging out together, watching, you know, what's going on, but not necessarily interacting with it. But you can kind of have that visual interaction with, okay, this is how the crowd is, you know, positioning themselves during my stream. So I don't know, it's just like things like these are like 4 hours last night, starting at like, you know, 10 o'clock. This is where my brain was. And I don't know, it's like things like that, things like these huge projects that I have no idea how it can be done, but know that if it's done, it could have major like impact.
Now, what's really funny is what you're describing there exists in pieces, and I'm actually part of one of those pieces. I'm a big proponent of VR. My brother coaxed me kicking and screaming into VR. I'm like, fine, I got the thing, and I'm like, why was I so hesitant to get into this? I have a home inside my VR world where I actually create objects in 3D that I print and sell in real life, but then you can browse my store in there. And
that was a huge portion. Like you have like a store, but more importantly, what I'm thinking is, as Twitch as a greater platform, like there's going to have to be a lot to support that, but you have these game developers that are being let go en masse. Amazon picks them up, Amazon Game Studio. You know what? But you know, some of that game studio goes into Twitch, creating this environment, creating these assets, because, you know, let's imagine in that world, how does this work for Twitch? Well, okay, so you're walking down this alleyway, and whether it be in VR or whether it's actually just, a typical like 3D environment that's created.
It's like Doom.
Yeah, well, kind of, almost. But imagine it like this. How would ads work? Well, my thinking was, what if you had these little boxes around, these chests, so you go up to the chest, open it up, it's like brought to you by Intel. Inside is like a 5% off of your Intel chip, a shirt or a cosmetic, and like some, I don't know, currency bits. Yeah. You get some bits.
Sure.
But you chose to interact with that. You're interacting with an advertisement, but you're doing it in a way that's cross beneficial. So then you take that, you can bring those bits that you got from opening up that box and like seeing that ad, you go to that store, give that to that streamer, you take a cosmetic, you put it on, and you can be a person, a character within the Twitch sphere. Because for me, I feel that chat, they're people, and they're cool people, and I want them to be a greater part of the process, not just as text on a screen, but something that represents them, beyond their badges, which would transfer obviously in 3D. You would have your badges, but yeah, I mean, imagine that Twitch in that world.
I think it'd be awesome. I think that to see, it's a combination of like VR chat, which is a cross-platform PC version versus VR version, where you can actually sit and like literally chat with anybody in people's worlds that they've made up. That almost seems like that's where this would begin. Granted, it would be lovely for Amazon to take care of it, but to walk past all these booths that have the streamer streaming in the back, and even if it's just playing VODs, and then you've got, until the streamer goes live. But I love the idea of going in and it being almost like a stand-up comedian type of atmosphere, theater, and your streamers that want to chat with you can physically chat, because that's one of my favorite things to do, is actually have another person sitting here that I can have, like we're doing right now, having a conversation, but still being able to work while having that conversation. And if it is the people from the stream that are the people who come in often and have, we have good rapport, it would be nice to have those people there. But then we have the lurkers, the people in the back who just want to hear the conversations, to be inspired by that, but then they can get up and leave whenever they need to. I think that would be glorious. You're saying it, I'm picturing
this like the Twitch. Think of Twitch as an MMO.
Yeah. But it could be basic,
and that's Well, and that's the thing. It doesn't actually need to require a lot of resources. And imagine if you went, I have a huge affinity for kind of like low poly art. It's just something that, like, simple geometry for me is something I love. So like imagine this like kind of low poly environment where it's, it has charm, but it's also not like intensive, because especially if it is something that's like, obviously it would have to be driven on a browser.
Sure.
So you could interact with it on a higher level, but if you can't, you can honestly be on your phone and still navigate. You know what I mean? Because again, what I want to do is I want to allow this like natural discovery, or like let your senses drive what content you watch, as opposed to a list. Right. Twitch.
Right.
Come on, you can do better. So,
we've all been to like the Ren Fair or to a craft show where you wander the aisles and you see the things and you're like, yep. Oh, I'm gonna wander into there.
Cool. I want to dive a little deeper into this.
Yeah. And it may be I just want to see the work. I'm gonna peruse, but it may also be I would like to know the person behind the work, and so I'm gonna chat. And I think that is a really, really interesting approach to the creative. It wouldn't work so much with games, because you'd be like,
I disagree.
Really?
I think it's all the same. Like you go to Game Utopia, and you know what? You can see like, okay, there's Fortnite Village over there. There's it's PUBG over here, and
sure,
you can still have that same level of interaction, whether it's creative or not. It's all the same, because it is still content being streamed out, and it's you as a streamer allowing to kind of curate your booth, curate how you present yourself beyond what you have on your screen. Because right now Twitch doesn't let you really do that,
Sure.
You have your tabs underneath, but who looks at that? Who looks at anything anymore? But if you have an interactive environment, it's going to be good. But
yeah,
again, this is like the pipe dream, and I'm almost frustrated now because I know it's not going to happen. But what I want to do, my initial instinct is to take that idea and mock it up, make a little video, see what that looks and feels like. And like, so that could be my next project, is I download Unity or I download Unreal, and I create this environment and how I see it in my head. And I make like a short 5-minute video of what that interaction would feel like. I like creating systems. I like creating things that have a structure to them, but also this like overall purpose. So like that could be a fun project that, you know, but here's the thing, like now I'm totally pissed because I'm thinking about that as opposed to the guitar that I was working on 30 minutes ago. All right. You know,
I think that is a crowdsourceable
difficult
idea, though. I think that while we are not necessarily we all don't have the skill sets required to do the whole of it. I think if you had 10 creatives who could make a booth or whatever in this thing, somebody creates the framework and you just demonstrate from from your 11th person.
Honestly, I was thinking the logistics of this, you know, at 1 a.m. obviously.
Sure.
And it was not too difficult in terms of being able to create. Actually, the hardest part is to have, I would need a bunch of different voice talent to kind of round out the experience. Everything else can kind of be curated in terms of like how things are presented to you, and it basically just becomes animation at that point.
Sure.
And then, you know, also tying it into, you know, a little bit of like Illustrator work to show how it would work within the platform. But like, you know, something we were saying last time we talked was Twitch needs to be shown what can be done. Because at the end of the day, they have so many projects, they have so many things that they're not coming up with these far out ideas. As far as I can tell, it seems like they're coming up with these mediocre ideas and then subpar pushing them out, and then definitely not supporting any of it. But if you show them something that excites the community,
right,
they're going to be more inclined to react to it. At least say, "Wow, that's an interesting way to approach this idea of discovering naturally this millions of people who are getting into streaming."
Now, Rob, tomorrow Jeff Bezos gives you a call and he says, "Hey, we heard about this thing on this wonderful thing called Ice Cream with Streamers, brought to you by Ben and Jerry's. This idea is perfect. Drop everything that you're doing and spearhead the committee that will do this. Do you take the job?"
Oh God, in a heartbeat.
Really? Even though you just said like 20 minutes earlier, I hate working with people. But
I hate working with people, but I will get over that to accomplish the project. I mean, I love the project. You don't understand how much I love the project that I will deal with people to get it done. And it's because at the end of the day, my personal preferences, again, completely aside to the fact that I want to get that project accomplished. I want to achieve the goal that I had with it.
And I think that is pretty much sums up any creative that's out there, is regardless of the internal struggle that is happening, the product, the output is the thing that has to happen. That baby must be born. Regardless if it's for good or for bad, and you're willing to sacrifice almost everything to get that out there. And I think creatives especially have that, know that. I think we all have it. I think creatives are just like, yeah, that's the demon that I got to deal with. You know, it's gotta come out.
It's real bad. We're all like creative-aholics. Most creatives I know, it is actually an impulse I can't control, which can actually be quite dangerous. I find it sometimes because you do lose that focus. Like something for me, I am a father first now, and that moved right to the front of the list. It's only been 2 weeks, but now I am a father first, and I'm an artist and designer second, and a streamer third. You know, and it's in like kind of that order. And it's like
you're a husband 1.5. Just in case your wife's listening.
I am a family man. How about that? I'm a family man first, then artist and designer, then thing. But and that's where my focus is that streaming is important, not as important as the work I'm doing, and the work I'm doing is not as important as my family.
Yeah.
And I think it's always having this kind of like perspective of like maybe I need to step away from some of my creative thinking, and that's the hardest thing I've ever done, is be like, put myself aside and my desires to be creative and be something else. It's very difficult to do that, but it's something it's taken me many years to become emotionally okay with it. It's hard to switch gears. I like to focus and like stay there. You know, I'm zeroed in and I don't move from that. But now that's not life. Life is having to jump around. It's having to be flexible. And, you know, that maybe that's just the 35 years or so of my life that just brought me to that point. But now I'm at like, okay, it's okay to jump around. I finally got there.
That's the wisdom that's wisdom coming into play right there, is what that is that priorities, because I was the same way. Work was number one, and then that priority changed on a dime, and you're like, but you notice that life still goes on even though that priority has changed, and that you are able to readjust. It's those people who fight that rather than bending towards it that find themselves either in a state of regret or in a state of constant turmoil inside. It's just being able to roll with it and finding the way to make it work. I think it's, you know, that there's some wisdom in that.
Well, I mean, I think the greatest challenge for most creatives is frustration. There's a lot of frustration that comes with the creative process, and it can lead to anger, and then obviously anger leads to the dark side. But like it's avoiding a lot of those traps. And as soon as you kind of have this almost team think aspect of it, that like you're just a component to this greater thing that is the project. And once you kind of resign yourself to that, it becomes a lot easier. Again, you know, decoupling the person from the project, it ends up becoming important from just like kind of an approach aspect, because it can get too personal, and it can hurt too hard. You know, I've been hurt by projects before, man. You know, I have definitely been hurt, and you know, but you got to kind of let it go, learn what you can from it, and move on. Like, I don't work in an office anymore because I was done with it. You know, it's like, and you just make those calls. You know? Absolutely. And I think that, you know, the human brain is made to remember the pain versus the pleasure more, because that's how we survive as a species. We survive by learning from our mistakes, so we are geared towards remembering those more. And so when we are hurt by projects, I mean, there's a different, you know, we have the expression, you know, you got to get back on the horse, and sometimes that pain from the project or whatnot can be that thing that keeps us from wanting to come back into it, and whether it be social anxiety or the project, the client was horrible or whatever that gets there. You've got to be willing to get back into it and not let the fear and the disappointment from the project or whatever it was keep you down. So oh yeah, well, and God, like when I worked in the exhibit industry, there was so much that you just pour your heart and soul into, and it just goes nowhere. And you're just like, oh my God, I physically hurt now. It's like, you hurt me, man. And not taking that personally it's very difficult, because I mean, obviously you, as a creative, pour your heart and soul into it, and to have it be rejected, especially if it's something you look at the competition, you're like, I got this, and then they go with that, and like, seriously, you know, who screwed up the budget here? Who did that? You know, you end up coming up with excuses. It becomes finger pointing, and in an office atmosphere, that gets very toxic very quick. And because you don't tend to learn from mistakes a lot in an industry like sphere, because it's hard to get 20 people to all learn the same lesson sometimes, unless someone's like, all right, we all need to learn this and do better next time, which no one wants to say, because people are relatively pretty timid in an office environment. Like, they're aggressive about dumb stuff and like super passive about anything that's going to increase efficiency, I found. But you know, it's all personality. It's all like who you work with and how you as a creative overcome like kind of your own emotional biases.
Now, do you feel that as a creative that's now on his own, that you are more willing to take risk, to you obviously voice your opinion more? Because I know when you're working for like an industrial situation where you're working in an office environment, it's not just that you are afraid of putting an idea out there, but you're afraid that it might cost you that job that you have in that office environment. Do you feel that now as a person who's doing it on their own, that you have the ability to take risk and chances that you would not have done before? Or do you feel that because you don't have the safety net of being in a group environment where if you yell at an idea that's dumb, somebody will hush you down and protect you, and so you're, I don't know, do you feel that you can be more risky?
I never once felt protected in an office environment. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I've never been more paranoid than when I was in an office, because people, again, kind of suck sometimes, but for the most part they're okay. But the problem is, like, office cultures tend to be just toxic in most environments I've been in. It's just like rampant with like personality issues that have nothing to do with the work, and it's very hard if you're not in like an environment that's super professional. Like, because the company I was at in doing exhibit design was like a 50 employee company, but we had huge like clients, like New Balance. We ended up doing their, so like my claim to fame from doing exhibit design was New Balance was the title sponsor for the New York City Marathon last year, and I designed their booth, which was a 30,000 square foot booth.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they basically, you had to go through this booth to get your bibs for running. So like millions of people running through this booth, and it was huge, and it was a complete cluster the entire way, because trying to engineer something that large, and like they wanted to make $4 million in 3 days. That was the mark.
Well, so do I.
That we had to hit. Yeah, right. And so it was just like, the pressure was on, but like that was something that was amazing. And if anyone wants to check that out, if you want to check out my website, it's on there. Also, Lego was my big client, which working with Lego was probably the most influential thing. That's the most influential client I've ever worked with, because their approach and them as a client is completely different than any other client I've ever had.
Nice.
They're like safety first for the kids, has to be fun. And all of that takes precedence over efficiency and price. So it was like that perfect client that they're like, they just want you to do your job well.
Wow.
And it's super refreshing, I will say. And I designed some booths for them. I worked on their Comic-Con booths. But mainly I focused on making these interactive toys that worked with their product. These interactive tables that worked with their product. So I was designing toys for Lego. 10-year-old me was super duper happy with me, adult me. So, and that was influential. And that really kind of was what really drove me to kind of break off once I moved here and not jump right back into exhibit design or doing fabrication or anything like that. And really just give myself, like, I came up with some really good ideas. And, but then you have to cut it off. It's like, okay, the next project starts up. Right. So that train of thought that you were in is disrupted. And what streaming is it's the allowing of that stream of conscious thinking, that like constantly evolving design sense. That's what I want to share, because I'm going off on tangents and I want you along for the ride, because I'm going to do it anyway, with or without you, but if you want to jump on the train, we're going.
Now, do you find that you're the same artist that you were 3 years ago?
I'm not the same artist I was yesterday. To be honest, I have to say I'm an artist and designer because that's what I do. I don't necessarily always feel like it. I feel like I'm just following these urges and using my experiences to inform my decisions. But none of it's like, Rob the artist is in the studio today, so what is Rob the artist going to do that's just amazing art? And it's like, no, it's like, I have a problem I want to solve, and like, what would be the best way to go about that, and how do I make that beautiful? And in the end, you end up with like something that is deemed art or deemed beautiful. But it's that awareness of during the process of learning that allows that to happen, and that's all what I want to share. Is like, hey, I just discovered something. Did you all just see that? and that's, for me, that's why I stream, is the fact that I get to share these epiphany moments. There's nothing better. I have not found a high that's better than like finding something out, someone else being like, look at what you did. And I'm like, I know, and it's that excitement, it's that passion that is like infectious. And it's again, it's like it's a drug, so streaming from like, I think a lot of people too is it's a little addictive. So it's a little bit of a drug because it's free, it's your mind, it's like pure interaction, pure transparency to the process, and it's all very exciting, and I get very like amped up about it. Now, but it might be the coffee, I'm not sure.
It's possible. So then my next question is, do you see yourself continuing to stream in 3 to 5 years? I said I wasn't going to ask you any of the 10 questions.
No,
this
totally
one pops
fine.
in
You
here.
Totally ask me all that. I have a document listed up with notes for each one of the questions, so I'm prepared.
Sweet. All right.
Yeah, that was before I had the Twitch as a game epiphany. So that was a few hours before that. Man, I should focus on other things. Anyway, 3 to 5 years. It's tough. It's hard to know because I had no idea a year ago that I was going to be streaming. Really, and I didn't even know that I was going to be getting into leatherworking or leather painting, back into gallery art, and then into instruments again. It's like, wait, is this like 10 years ago? It's this cycle for me, and it's kind of scary but comfortable. But I see streaming as an important part of my process. It's become the conversation. It's me sharing. So even if I'm not necessarily streaming, the aspect of recording, I think, is something that's going to stay with me. So whether that content gets pushed out or not, I'm not sure. It really comes down to the benefit of it. If at any point streaming becomes negative, and like there was some points that it kind of became negative to me. I was looking at numbers, I was looking at the wrong things. And I mean, this is a tale as old as Twitch time, but it's hard as a creative mind, as anyone who's putting themselves out there like that, to not get the kind of response you're hoping for. It can be soul crushing, and it takes a while to kind of be like, am I okay with soul crushing? It's like, am I okay with that? But again, it's using that mentality I developed from working in an office and being able to block that out as best I can. I mean, I'm an emotional being, so obviously you can very easily slide back in, but it's all about awareness. It's all about kind of taking a step back and being like, what is my response right now?
Well, in theater,
I think
in theater, the way that we always approached it was your performance for a full house should not be different than a performance for one audience member, because you never know if that one audience member, if that performance will change their life. And so why would you, if anything, you would then really push to that one person the performance, the output. And I think that with streaming, while numbers are and have been instructed into us or put into us that the numbers are the important part, as creatives in Twitch, I think that it's the content that we're more concerned with. And then the people who do wander through, much like your virtual reality Twitch, as the people wander through, even if it's just one person sitting down to really get to know your process and stuff, it's one person can make a huge difference rather than 1,000 people that, 1,000 people who don't interact is not nearly as good as one person who does with Twitch. And I think that while I would love to have the numbers of 1,000 viewers, if I'm not getting the interaction out of it, then to me it's just, I might as well YouTube it. Whereas if I get one person, if I can have a conversation with Rob for 2 hours that to me feels like it's going to change my direction in something, I would rather do that just for that, with that one person, than to do it in front of 1,000.
No, and Twitch has shaped projects that I've done, period. And this is something I'm fully admitting of, that it's you as the viewer are in a unique position, because as opposed to like gaming or something like that, you can shape the aesthetic. I mean, Theseus Paradox is a follower of mine that constantly. Like he'll have like little nuggets of like information, and I'll be like, yeah, I think that might work. Let's try that out, and actually shape the like environment. It's and I have a bunch of viewers who are just like that, and those are the people. Like, so my view is I'm not trying to collect viewers. I'm trying to collect cool people.
Mm-hmm.
And and at the end of the day, that's what's important. It's like, you had something interesting to say, like, keep talking. Let's have a conversation, because, and again, it's about that conversation. Like, I wouldn't be on Twitch if I had 0 viewers. I probably wouldn't do it. The fact that I have 3 to 10, that makes it more significant for me. Even though, like, in the grand reality of life, that's like super dumb to do. It's like, why are you spending that time for those 3 people? And I'm like, because those 3 people are cool, man. Like, you don't know them. You don't, like, you got Ginger over here, he's
right.
cool,
And I find that I used to do this show out in LA, in Hollywood, with a bunch of celebrities and stuff. And before the show, they would always do a rehearsal. So we'd all gather in the director's house, and we just kind of sit around, and they would read the script, and they'd all kind of hang out and such. And I always felt like, while I'm surrounded by an incredible amount of talent, because I wasn't one of the talent, I felt like I was an outsider in that regard. But I was surrounded by these groups that I could just see were adored by the audience and such. But I remember going to a dinner with just like a handful of them, and we actually got to sit and chat and like actually have a conversation, and I felt so much more of a connection in that tiny little atmosphere than instead of seeing this house where just throngs of people are like rushing past other people, and I'm like, I am technically a part of this, but do not feel like I'm a part of anything. Whereas that small interaction with that tiny group, and that's to me is what Twitch feels like. It's instead of being someplace that I've got to go, I'm in Nebraska. I mean, there's not throngs of people here who are interested in the things that I'm doing, but I open it up, and I have people around the world that actually have interest in my work, that I can have conversations and that kind of thing. And I think that is really what has driven me to continue to stream, while not necessarily pushing the numbers. It is those connections to real human beings that are, not numbers. They are people, and then I think that is it's making a huge difference for my art.
That's where I think the power of the platform can come in. That it can provide this macro, micro, interaction, and it really comes down to who wants to come to the table, who doesn't, and go from there. React as it goes, and that's actually been the hardest thing, is like, how do you shift that interaction? How do you engage, disengage? It becomes this like juggling act that as streamers you're already juggling. You have tech, like way more tech than we ever need. Or at least I do, because like when I got into streaming, I had a bunch of cameras, I had a bunch of things, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I can do this, but now I have this like cob job of different wires and different equipment all like adding up, and I have to constantly be fiddling with all of it. So I'm doing that, but I'm also creating and streaming and then doing family. It's just like, it gets to a point where it's just overwhelming. And sadly, I think viewers take the hit first. And that's something as a streamer I'm trying to be better about, is that just to like, I am broadcasting, and even though it's just this, I'm broadcasting me and who I am at that moment, and not necessarily a character, it's hard, like, because I still want to be likable, I still want to be like informative, but then sometimes I'm super grumpy and I'm not. And I kind of feel bad about it, which is kind of like a cycle thing, it just kind of spirals out. And then like, so there's been times I've just been like, I'm just streaming, bye, see you in a week, or something like that. And I hate doing that, because that's kind of not the person I am, but you get wrapped up in the emotion of it, the overwhelming force of streaming. And that's where like we as streamers are doing so much for how much effect, and it becomes hard. It becomes like this personal choice that you almost have to make. It's like, what are you willing to sacrifice? And for me, I've decided like I'm willing to sacrifice my like physical self for like this cause, and just like, I don't sleep much or whatever, but it's you gotta, family first, artist designer second, streamer third, and then person probably after that. That's kind of like how it breaks down. But we all have to make those sacrifices, but there are some sacrifices I won't make. Like,
Sure.
I'm not going to do a 48-hour stream. Are you insane? No,
No.
It's dumb for me. For other people that works, but I can't do that. After 8 hours of like constant talking and creating, it's content doesn't create itself like in a video game. We are. So I equate it to like this. Imagine animating in real time. Like the physical process of it, making each frame, bit by bit, all the while interacting, doing the voiceover, doing like all of this bits in real time while being creative. It's overwhelming, and so that's what I have to like fight against, is that perception. Because the reality is, after everything settles out, you kind of get into a groove. It just becomes natural. It becomes this muscle memory.
Now, do you feel that you have to, as an artist, create false, basically like put yourself in a situation in which you are creating bullshit scenarios, or just to give you that something because you're running out of stuff?
No, I have enough drama like in my life that I don't need to make it up for myself. It kind of comes naturally. And again, that's where for me, like, I realized like I can't be the personality of Protean Projects. I can only be the artist Rob, working for Protean Projects. You know what I mean? Where I kind of have a job to do, but I'm still me, and I'm allowing me to be me. So I don't think of it as like a performance. I stop thinking about like, am I talking enough? Am I talking too much? Am I rambling? Am I like totally like lost on my thoughts? I try not to think about all of that, because if I'm self-critical in the moment, you just kind of like, then you're just like,
yeah, right. You finally see the mirror.
It's like, it's weird.
Right.
But it's, and everyone deals with it differently. And my favorite thing about Twitch is seeing how everyone deals with this kind of awkward thing of just being in front of a camera, talking to the universe.
I don't know. I think you're doing a pretty good job here. I mean, you seem to be doing all right,
Yeah. I mean, we're all faking it, to be honest.
Hey, we are.
But we're not. We're all approaching it from our unique perspectives. So but that's what's fascinating. It's like, I like seeing the people. The people of Twitch is the fascinating part of it. And it needs to be like the main focus. I think if Twitch wants to exist as a future platform, it needs to make characters of its users.
That's fair. All right, so I'm gonna open it up to questions. Does anybody here? We now have our people. Does anybody here have a question for Protean Project, for Rob here? We'll open it up here briefly. I'm gonna do a signal. Paul. Okay, that's to let me know that's where we're gonna ask for questions here. Yeah, there you go. Right. Where's my little blinky thing up here so that my bot can figure it out? No. So, does anybody have any questions for Protean? So this is the painful part about opening it up for questions. Is the delay is kind of awkward. But so would you? Okay, so I personally am interested in this VR chat things. I think you and I need to sit down and work this out. Or you just
we'll get the team on it.
I think that's what we need to do. Okay. It says, when are you and PP going to take over the world? Well, since we're both PP, I think that's going to be interesting. So when we're going to take over Twitch,
PPs unite.
That's right. That docking? No, that's inappropriate. Okay. Was there a shout out for this kind gentleman? I'm only half an hour lurking here. Shay, this is Protean Project. Yes. Not really a question, but being nosy. What was the electronic device you were working on? Protean. What was that, Rob? What was that? Can you hold up that piece that you were working on?
This guy?
Yeah.
This is the circuit board for a tube amp, which...
I hope you didn't just drop that. Oh, okay, good.
So... my tubes, all this. So this is the kind of like the basics of all of it. But like I said, I'm scared of like all of this. So I don't know if it's a project that's ever going to get finished. But it's because and honestly, the main reason I was scared about it was because like I got plans offline, basically, and I'm like, oh man, someone's gonna electrocute me offline because I misread something, and it's no good. But yeah, I mean, electronics is something I like playing around with, but I kind of keep it more towards low voltage, like Arduino based stuff, where I can just play around small scale and just add functionality to kind of non-digital stuff. So I mean, that's the only time I really play around with a lot of electronics nowadays.
Tribe665 wants to know, I saw you using Vectorworks the other day. Is that your go-to CAD program?
Sadly, yeah. I mean, I like the program. It's almost Stockholm syndrome at this point because I had to work with it for the last 6 years. So doing exhibit design, the company I worked for solely used like Vectorworks. And the reason they use Vectorworks is because it's one of the few CAD programs that really works well on a Mac. And I mean, I have a PC at home, which I have it on now, but which they changed the hotkeys between the two platforms. So now like every time I have to like copy move something, I have to like do it twice because my hotkey is like off on it and I can't adjust it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so that's the main CAD program. I've used a lot of others, Fusion 360. I've used SolidWorks, Alias. I mean, Rhino. I've used a bunch of different programs. I really like Vectorworks because I find it's like a nice middle ground between SketchUp and SolidWorks, where it allows for this kind of like rapid ideation without like getting too hung up on the specifics. I find like when you work in SketchUp, it's not specific enough, but when you work in SolidWorks, it's too specific. So Vectorworks plays this nice middle ground where you can kind of just sandbox in it, play around, and just like explore the form you're making as opposed to dealing with the program.
Excellent. Can you talk about a time you failed and how you recovered from it? Theseus Paradox wants to know.
Oh my god. I fail all the time. I make mistakes a bunch. I always say there's like hope in failure. It's every time I make a mistake or do something, it's an opportunity to apply creative problem solving. It's an opportunity, and this is something that every creative does naturally, I think, is you are placed into a situation and you need to respond to it. And it's down to your decision making, how to approach it. And so problems and issues and mistakes like that, when they come up, it's typically where I learn the most. It's an education making a mistake all the time, and especially if you're learning a new craft or doing something that just isn't going to work out, you find out pretty quick why, and if you continue on with the problem. But anything in particular, no, I'm just too good. No, that's horrible. No, I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I'm also extremely meticulous. The reason I do things in CAD is because I can have that extreme control. There are relationships, there's ratios that I just follow that feel good in my head, and I'm able to kind of express through that. And so in terms of like execution, it's usually like, okay, did I mess up? I guess like recently the worst thing I've done was I was making the first bag I was making on the channel. It was this backpack design for a client, and I ended up starting to stitch it up, and it was like a turned bag, so I had to get everything lined up just right, and I was off by a few stitch marks. So I got pretty much all the way to the end and then had to like tear all the way back out most of the way, readjust and do it. So it's like it tends to be lost time, and that just came down to poor planning or just having my tolerances too tight and not giving myself wiggle room. A lot of times, to avoid mistakes, I'll approach a problem where it gives me an out, where I'll grow a dimension one way or another, knowing that I can trim to if I can. And so I always try to set up my projects and what I do to a point where I give myself options when inevitably I make a mistake. So, I mean, that's how I try to approach it, so I minimize the impact of, screwing up.
Excellent. And you've spent a lifetime accumulating skills. What was your favorite skill to learn, and what is your favorite skill to use? That's a good question. Thanks, Theseus.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you, Theseus. My favorite skill that I've learned. It's because I've like had a lifetime of acquiring skills. Honestly, it's working with materials. It's a mentality of working with materials, of whatever it is. It's a thinking of how to approach a situation with a new material, whether it be like a 3D print, leather, canvas, clay, whatever it is, how you approach a new material and the kind of dialogue you get to have and the experiences and experimentations. That's why I do what I do, is because I like taking things, you know, that I've learned over here and applying it over here. Like the greatest thing I've done recently that really clicked well was in between projects. I've done two things. I've done knitting and crocheting and miniatures painting. And like I said, like I did this because I need that headspace to clear out and just kind of just do a process, learn something, not in like kind of a low stress environment, but take what I learned from those experiments and apply it. So it's like doing the miniatures was excellent cross training for painting on the leather. Doing knitting and cross stitch was an excellent way of meditating and also just developing a sense of flow with muscle memory. So it's taking any material that comes your way and making the most out of it and really doing it justice, because I think all materials are beautiful and can be turned into like beautiful, glorious things, but you just really need to be able to coax it out, you know? And that's my favorite thing. So what was the second part of that question?
The second part of the question was, and what's your favorite skill to use?
Favorite skill to use? I like doing lutherie. I really like making instruments because it's a very personal, like I feel like, especially working with like a larger instrument like a guitar or like an acoustic, shaping the bracing, shaping all of these things, making all of these calculations and assumptions, and then having this object that you can then strum and know whether it worked out or not. You know, it's like, does it sound good or does it not? And sometimes you make good choices, sometimes you make bad choices, but it's a nice way to put yourself into a situation where, you know, you can sink or swim, and it can be glorious or it can be dead, you know, and it's that excitement, it's that rush that I get from it that just makes it super cool. But at the end of the day, anything that makes me like my heart excited when I'm making something, like where like I get super excited because I figured something out, or I did something that I wasn't sure was going to work and it worked, and it's like, there's no better feeling than that.
Excellent. Well, I would like to thank you personally, Rob, for sitting with me for these last 2 hours and just chatting. I think, and honestly, I hope that we can just sit and chat out of Ice Cream with Streamers for years to come, because I think you and we just have good conversation here. I mean, I really truly enjoy just riffing with you, because it's really nice to see good ideas flow like they are.
Yeah, no, it was fun.
If you guys haven't already, please give Rob a follow at Protean Projects. That's twitch.tv/Protean Projects. I'm Paul Pape of Paul Pape Designs. You can find me at Paul Pape Designs or twitch.tv/Paul Pape Designs. Thank you again. We're going to do the outro here. Excellent. I'm glad everyone is following them. We're going to do the outro, and then so the screen's gonna go blank, but then I need somebody to raid. So let's take our group of people here and go and raid somebody else. So if we've got an idea of somebody we'd like to raid, can you please put it into the channel there, into our chat, and then we'll go find somebody to raid. So
yeah, thank you, Paul, and thank you, chat, for hanging out.
Hey, we enjoy it, and you just grabbed yourself a bunch of new follows from this, man. So hopefully,
I'll take it.
Hey,
take it.
Do
Bring it on.
That's right. All right. So okay. So they're saying Bex. Let's raid Timber. Timber new. Yeah, I haven't raided Timber. In a
yeah,
while.
totally, definitely Timber. Timber's
right.
awesome woodworker.
All right, we're gonna do Timber new. I haven't raided him in a while, so there we go. So we're gonna raid Timber new. Thank you everybody again for joining us today. Remember to work smarter, not harder, and enjoy your ice cream. So we'll see you guys later.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Join us next week, same bat time, same bat channel, for some more Ice Cream with Streamers.